No worries. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. I would love if you would all stand and join me in our opening song. We're all going to sing it together. We're going to sing this through 3 times, called Circle Round for Freedom. It's number 155 in our gray hymnal. As Unitarian Universalists, we have sung this many times in many different contexts, and I think it's a good way to start our time together this morning, talking about Martin Luther King Jr. If everybody wants to rise with me, and we will sing together. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Let's do that again. Feel free to add harmonies if you'd like to. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, and you can shake too. For all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. One more time. Circle round for freedom. I need to hear more. Circle round for peace. Awesome. For the love of us in prison. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for each soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Awesome.
Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton. We welcome you here in the sanctuary and those of us who may be joining us online. For those of us who are joining in person this morning, please do turn off your devices. My name is Tim Versteeg. My pronouns are he, him, and it is my great pleasure to serve this church as its religious educator. I'll be your service leader this morning. We thank the many people who are co-creating our service experience this morning. Our music minister, music director Rachel Derry, our speaker, Reverend Jamie Boyce, who is our interim minister for a few more months at least, our worship assistants, Susan and Ian Johnstone, our ushers, Agnes Cunningham and Sandy Lambert, and our tech team, Brian Carey, Eamon Bullock, Claire Miles, and John Elliott. Didn't have John's name written down, so I had to kind of, As always, in our multi-generational services, of which this is one, our CYRE activity cart is available at the front to borrow items to keep hands and minds active during the service. Our nursery is open if you have that need. If you do, Barb Wallace is right there, and she can help you out to get back there and get settled. We will have a lovely service of singing together this morning. And if you have not yet grabbed something to shake with, they are available. And before the Time for All Ages, Mayas will be circulating, handing them out, and at that time you can put up your hand and he'll get you one, but we're not quite there yet. Well, we'll see what we can find for you. A vital part of our lives together and our ministries to each other in the world is the sharing of news in our community. And this morning we have these announcements to share. The January book club, the next book club will be held on January 15th from 1 to 3 o'clock in Fellowship Hall. And the book being discussed is Laughing with the Trickster by Thompson Highway, which was the Massey lecture a couple of years ago. If you have any questions, please contact Nancy Kumpf or Barb Wallace. A couple of related announcements. Today at noon is the 2024 budget information meeting, in which information will be available and questions will be welcome and snacks will be provided. I believe that's going to be in here, Martin? Yep, okay. And then also at noon today, we do have a potluck for newcomers and families and anybody else who wants to jump in and has brought some food. And that's going to be happening in Fellowship Hall after the service. Following on that budget information meeting, we will have our vote on January 28th at noon, and the congregation will vote on the 2024 budget, and that will be again at noon in the sanctuary on January 28th. So if you are a member, you can vote. If you are not a member, you can attend, but you cannot vote. Climate Cafe. Climate Action Team invites you to the second Climate Cafe next Sunday, January 21st, here in the sanctuary after the service. They'll explore the topic of climate advocacy. What does it look like? How can we bring about systematic change? And finally, volunteers, cashiers are needed. Volunteer cashiers count Sunday and special collections and keep records for the bookkeepers, and some also make bank deposits. It's a quiet, orderly way to do very important work for our church. Counts do happen during work hours, mainly on 2 Fridays a month in the early afternoon. 2 volunteers are necessary for each count, so most often you would count once monthly. Police record check is required if your offer to volunteer is accepted, and please contact the church office if you are interested in that role. For these and many other announcements, just check our website or our all church emails on Thursday. And I'd like to invite Catherine Boda up to light our chalices this morning. There you are, Catherine. Oh, you don't have a flame there for you. Our chalice represents the light of hope at the center of our faith tradition. The spark of this flame draws us into our time of worship and community. And please join me in reading the chalice words now shared on the screen. May this flame be our light of friendship and love. Our land acknowledgement. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. The land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, we are a city of 570,000 people, among whom are 17,000 citizens of Indigenous ancestry from across Turtle Island. And the effect of settler colonialism is not a static entry in the history book. It is present in our life today. The responsibility of people with settler ancestry who continue to benefit from the land and its resources is to face the truth of our collective pasts and work for equity and justice in our present world. Only through truth can we hope to reach reconciliation.
Let's run the video.
On a hot day in August 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a speech that would define the civil rights movement and his legacy. This, of course, was his I Have a Dream speech, delivered on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
The March on Washington served as a massive push for economic and political justice for African Americans. Held during the year celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, crowds marched on the National Mall to watch a variety of musical performances and speeches. Dr. King, a Baptist preacher and prominent civil rights leader, was scheduled to speak towards the end of the day, his debut on the national stage. Up until that point, King mostly addressed small crowds at black churches, rallies, or fundraisers. This time, he would be seen by nearly 250,000 people on the ground, as well as millions at home watching on television. This was an opportunity to reach a wide audience and persuade the public and the government to take action against racial injustice. The night before, King worked with a close group of advisors to get the speech just right. They worked through the night, settling on a final draft in the pre-dawn hours of August 28. Interestingly, the phrase, "I have a dream," a phrase he used in earlier speeches, was nowhere to be found in this copy. The words wouldn't manifest until almost halfway into Dr. King's speech, when gospel singer Mahalia Jackson, who had performed earlier in the day, called out to him from the sidelines to tell them about the dream. King set his prepared remarks aside and improvised the rest, crafting a soaring speech that would sear into the minds of millions of Americans.
No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
The speech was divided into 2 parts. The first listed the injustices that African Americans faced: segregation, police brutality, disenfranchisement, and discrimination, and urged a call to nonviolent action. The second launched into King's dream of peace and racial harmony, a vision of a future in which people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
I have a dream.
Highlighting King's skills as a preacher, I Have a Dream was part sermon and part poetry, using rhetorical devices like repetition, rhyme, and vivid metaphor to drive his points home. It was peppered with historic, biblical, and literary references that moved the crowd. This message of struggle and hope became the defining moment not only of King's career, but also the civil rights movement. Both the speech and the March on Washington were credited with helping secure the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a landmark piece of legislation that ended segregation and banned discrimination on the basis of race or sex in the workplace.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
The speech also resonated with activists around the globe. I have a dream. The phrase that wasn't even meant to be in his final draft appeared in political actions all around the world. It's considered one of the world's most transformative and influential speeches, alongside others like Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and Winston Churchill's Blood, Toil, Tears, and Sweat. I Have a Dream is only one of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s many achievements, but it's nonetheless one of the most pivotal.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
I love that story of Mahalia Jackson leaning over to Reverend Dr. King and saying, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." Wasn't in his original script. It reminds me that some of the greatest moments in history are unscripted, and that we live in a world in which improvisation can change the world. Good morning. My name is Reverend Jamie Boyce. My pronouns are she, her, and I serve as this congregation's interim minister. In that role, I journey with the congregation as you prepare to call your next settled minister. We are so glad that you are here with us on this chilly morning. Today is an exciting day. This service this morning will be followed by the budget meeting, which you heard about, with a lunch provided here in the sanctuary. And if you're joining online, a link to the budget meeting was sent out as well for quick and easy access. Welcome to this service of song as we celebrate the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and renew our commitment to justice, equity, and freedom among us. This service continues the January theme of justice as a guiding and sustaining shared value of our faith, as named in the emergent revisions to Article 2 of the Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws. The proposed Article 2 revision identifies justice as our commitment to working to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive, and covenanting to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. And we support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make sure decisions within our congregations and our association and society at large are held by the people. Prepare, friends, for a musical journey this morning as we sing and reflect on the music of justice movements in North America, noticing how Unitarian Universalists continue a tradition of movement music. Prepare, friends, to learn and be challenged by history and by the songs that shape and drive the spirit of our commitments. Let us gather, beloveds, to worship and renew our bodies and spirits as we celebrate the music of justice. Let us sing together the songs of resistance, freedom, and love. And the spirit of the love that knows no bounds, I invite you to greet your neighbors, perhaps placing your hand on your heart and reminding those in your tiny neighborhood of the sanctuary, I'm glad you're here. And if you're joining us online, I invite you to greet each other in the chat. Please, let's continue to be together in community and rise in body or spirit for our first song, number 118. If you're following along in the hymnal, we know this one. It's a good one. This little light of mine, please rise in body and spirit and let us sing.
And I think noisemakers would be very helpful in this one.
Yes.
Rachel's not going to move because I tried to work out a song on my guitar thinking, I'm going to play it. It didn't go well. So, Myas is going around now with the shakers. If you would like one and haven't yet received one, just stick up your hand and he'll get to you. We're going to sing If I Had a Hammer. Myas, there's some ladies in the back who would like shakers. If I Had a Hammer was written by Pete Seeger and Lee Hayes in 1949, and this was an anthem for many progressive concerns of the day, specifically the labor movement. Why a hammer? When I was a kid, I could not figure out why this song was singing about hammers. So, you know, even as an adult, it puzzled me a little bit. So I actually went back and I had a look. And because the song is talking about blue-collar workers, it talks about hammers and bells because these were symbols of the workers in the factories and the mines that Seeger and Hayes were singing about. Seeger, you may know, and Lee Hayes as well, were members of a group called the Almanac Singers in the 1940s and a group called the Weavers in the 1950s, a group which was blacklisted during McCarthyism for their political activism. Seeger went on to be a political activist with few peers, lending his voice to a myriad of progressive causes, including the civil rights movement in the 1960s. So, the words are going to be up there. Rachel's going to play it for us. I'm going to try to lead you in song. Rachel will help, I hope. And if you want to stand up and shake, go for it. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out warning, I'd ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. I got a hammer, and I got a bell. I got a song to sing all over this land. It's the hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land.
All over this land, all over this land.
Got to catch my breath. When Tim, Beverly, and I sat down to imagine this service, we were inspired by history, the history of movement and protest music, as it infuses the work of justice with hope, possibility, as it soothes the soul when it longs to overcome weariness, as it reminds us of the heartbeat of collective power and the rhythms of change. We reflected on the musical tradition of the civil rights movement and the songs of community resistance, speaking truth to power and making a way out of no way, a call that invokes the divine as a partner in the struggle for liberation. Today, we're reminded as we rise up in song together that music makes a difference, and we must continually do the work of connecting with history in meaningful ways, especially for us white folks who sing and don't always ask questions about what we're singing together. I remember learning This Little Light of Mine in elementary school, and I used to love singing it while running around in the rain and splashing in the puddles. It was a song we sang a lot in school. And I notice now the troubling way it was taught to me simply as a children's song in a predominantly white classroom that made it easy to erase its origins and its important role in sustaining the civil rights movement as a song of radical resistance. This Little Light of Mine is an anthem for all ages, an anthem that carries and embodies a history of struggle. It was sung by Fannie Lou Hamer at the Democratic National Convention in 1964, and it was on the song list of the Freedom Singers of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The Freedom Singers, founded by Cordell Reagan in Albany, Georgia in 1962 during the Albany movement to organize voting rights. From the SNCC historical timeline. Freedom singing was a vital part of SNCC's community organizing tradition. When Sam Block went to Greenwood, Mississippi to start SNCC's first voter registration project in the Mississippi Delta, one of the first things he did was teach local people freedom songs. The songs, often borrowed from the traditional church songs, helped thaw some of the fear that locals had toward the movement. I began to see the music as an important organizing tool, Block reported, not only to bring people together, but also as an organizing glue to hold them together. This Little Light of Mine is part of this tradition of freedom songs, stretching back into history as an African-American spiritual, as a tradition of prayer, resistance, and defiance. And it's important to revisit this history over and over again, noticing how white supremacy culture deflects and dismisses and erases Black history. And there is a growing movement of faith-based communities who are coming forward to offer reparations for the use of these songs. White music director and organist Susan DeSelms reflects in an article published by Duke Divinity's Faith and Leadership Forum that, quote, even before the abolition of slavery, these songs started to make their way into the collective memory of white Americans and into the hymn books. They have also become the source of an untold number of musical arrangements and compositions published and sold to churches, schools, community choruses, orchestras, bands, and all manner of musical organizations. Indeed, even Bruce Springsteen has a version of This Little Light of Mine, and it's a pretty exciting version, I admit, but it does invite us to consider who gets compensated and how can we disrupt the ongoing exploitation of this musical tradition. How do our values shape our relationship to history and the work of repair? My challenge to us this morning as Unitarian Universalists, as we rise up in song celebrating the music of justice as it arrives in our faith, is to be bold and brave in remembering history, to consider the work ahead and live fully into our commitments to justice, and remain devoutly curious and willing to do the work of repair, the work that puts our faith into action. So let us rise up. Let us rise up in song, rise up in purpose, and rise to the call of our faith. May it be so. I invite us to rest and dwell in a time of reflection, meditation, and prayer. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, today we celebrate the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we renew our commitment to his legacy of justice. We do this knowing that such commitment requires tenacity and perseverance, learning and growing, making mistakes and making amends. At times, the work can feel as though we can't keep pace, that the world might overwhelm us into silence, distract us with untruths, and divide us from our shared humanity and common cause. At times, we might feel helpless, and peace feels so far away in a world ravaged by war, ravaged by apathy, torn apart by alliances and allegiances that forget that we are united in a web of mutuality and responsibility. We still show up and bear witness to the evils of racism, poverty, militarism, and violence against the earth. And we're called to action. The world needs us now more than ever. Spirit of life and love, let us be renewed. Let us be renewed in our commitment and our collective responsibility to care for each other and the earth as we live into the radical idea of a beloved community of justice, love, and belonging. Let us rest in the quiet and hold silence, praying for peace in ourselves and peace in the world. As you feel called, those gathered here in the sanctuary are invited to come forward and light candles of community, the flames of love and transformation that remind us that each little light is a part of a community of love. Those gathered online are invited to share in the chat as you feel called. Now is the time in our service where we share the joys and sorrows of community. Today, I share a sorrow from Gail Rapole. Our family shares with sadness that our dear brother Peter died Sunday night, January 7th, a day before his 63rd birthday. Pete taught us many things, and we will miss his sense of humor, his insights, and his loving heart. Today, we are grateful that he is at peace. We will celebrate Pete's life at the farm in the summer, a date to be announced later. Gail shares, "Thank you all at this church who made him feel so at home when he was well enough to spend weekends with me, and who over the years have asked so kindly for him. He loved helping take up the collection and lighting candles for family members, and of course, anything to do with food, like Kath's Christmas Eve dinners, which are remembered fondly by many. And finally, Gail continues, "I am grateful for the love and support of this community, never more evident than this week. We know our flowers this morning are from the celebration of life yesterday, right, Gail? And they are from our members at large in the wider Hamilton, First Hamilton community, Jennifer Kay and Les Sasaki. Thank you, everyone, Sasaki. Thank you, everyone who sent flowers from Newfoundland, right? Gail, we are with you on this journey of grief and here for you in all the places you need us to show up. We have a joy and a sorrow from Catherine Boda. Catherine shares, "My mother is still alive but not speaking. I think she appreciates my father and I visiting in the nursing home. She smiles often. Catherine, let her know that we are smiling too and smiling with you. We hold you and your mom and your dad in our care." We know that there are joys and sorrows among us that are too tender yet to share, and we hold those among us in friendship and care, remembering that none of us are alone.
The offering that we accept each Sunday is an opportunity to recommit ourselves to this community and to our relationship with one another. When we give, we say yes to something that we value. With gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. If you're joining us online this morning and would like to make a donation to the life of the church, there is a button on the web page which allows you to do so. Our offertory music this morning is written by Micmac singer Willie Dunn. I pity the country, I pity the state, in the mind of a man who thrives on hate. Small are the lives of beaten of liars, a bigoted news press, fascist town criers. Deception annoys me. Deception destroys me. The Bill of Rights froze me. Jails, they all know me. Frustrated are churchmen, the saving a soul man, the tinker, the tailor, the colonial governor. They pull and they paw me, they're seeking to draw me away from the roundness of the life. Silly civil servants, they thrive off my body. Their trip is with power, back bacon and welfare. Police, they arrest me. Materialists detest me. Pollution, it chokes me. In movies, they joke me. Politicians exploit me. City life, it jades me. Hudson's Bay fleeces me. Hunting laws freak me. Government is bumbling. Revolution is rumbling. To be ruled in impunity is tradition, continuity. I pity the country, I pity the state, and the mind of a man who thrives on hate. Your gifts in support of the ministries of our church are appreciated. Thank you. There's been an ongoing conversation between Reverend Jamie and I since she arrived, which often circles back to political action and differences between the United States and Canada. And a while ago, she asked me about protest songs in Canada, and at the time I hadn't given it much thought, but after some reflection, this morning I want to give you some points to ponder. I'll start with a quote from the first Prime Minister Trudeau from a speech in 1969 to the Washington Press Club. And he said to his American audience, "Living next to you is in some ways like sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly and even-tempered is the beast, if I can call it that, one is affected by every twitch and grunt. Every policy, every trend, every bit of unrest in the United States has an effect on Canada. But we are not the United States, even though we share a lot of the same histories and traditions. So while oppression and racism are a part of Canada's DNA, past and present, that DNA had and has a different expression and poses different challenges than those faced in the United States. And while we heard the politicized songs coming from the U.S. during the Civil Rights Movement and before, and even adopted some of them and adapted them, and I think of Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land," which in our version was from Bonavista Vista to the Vancouver Island, you know, and the Americans probably don't even know where those places are. Our protest music has always had a different flavor and expression. And the mothership, as the CBC used to be known, even legitimized and spread certain kinds of protest music in the 1960s and 70s, particularly those songs protesting working conditions. Union songs and programs like Sing Along Jubilee out of the East Coast, which coincidentally was where we first heard Anne Murray, were popular at the same time that American television was pulling the plug on Pete Seeger during a performance of Waist Deep in the Big Muddy because it was too politicized to be on the air. Often we were aware of the struggles as illustrated by Gordon Lightfoot's song Black Day in July, which was written about the 1967 Detroit race riots, which lasted 5 days and saw 43 people dead. It seems as if the tradition of protest music in Canada, though, has always been more performative than collective. Blogger Stephen Richer suggests in an online article, 10 Canadian Songs That Made a Difference, that unlike American protest songs, which have an anthemic quality and derive their impact by being sung collectively by large groups during highly visible public demonstrations, Canadian protest songs are typically performance songs, presented by individuals or groups in concerts and recordings. Richard posits two main reasons for the difference. One, that there were no plantations in Canada and the country didn't have a call and response and spiritual tradition as emerged in the US during slavery. And though there was slavery in Canada, enslaved people were isolated and widespread here in domestic servitude, work on farms, or in hotels and taverns. Enslaved people in Canada, he goes on to say, were a more heterogeneous group than in the US. They consisted of Africans from diverse backgrounds, but also a large number of indigenous peoples. Now, leaving aside debates about the accuracy of census methods, of which there are many, a comparison of the demographic statistics between the US and Canada highlights the differences of relative populations at the start or the middle kind of the civil rights period and also today. In 1960, according to the US Census, 11% of the US population were black, but only 0.3% were indigenous at that time. Today, those numbers are 12.6% and 0.7%. Now compare this with Canada, which in 1960, out of a population of 18 million, quite smaller than the US, only 0.2% of Canada's population was black. 1.2% were reported as indigenous at that time, and indigenous population growth would outpace the rest of Canada's for decades and currently stands at about 5% of Canada's population compared to Canada's black population, which is 4.3%. So, perhaps it's no surprise that the most powerful protest music, in my opinion at least, in Canada of the period came from indigenous voices. In the introductory liner notes of the 3-album collection called Native North America Volume 1, Aboriginal Folk Rock and Country, 1966 to 85, the producer Kevin Howes notes that beginning in the 1960s and well into the 1980s, a movement of Aboriginal musicians, artists, writers, and poets from across North America crafted a new blend of music: folk, country, rock, pop, blues, jazz, and classical, all reflected through their distinct cultural heritages. Now, noting this fusion of mainstream forms, Howes goes on to suggest that these artists took these influences and combined them with Native consciousness, stories, and poetry inspired by language, love, family, history, ceremony, traditionalism, self-determination, activism, reserve life, the rural-urban divide, and environmental issues. Now, this is not to suggest that these artists were caught in amber. They were also writing and reacting to the current events at the time. He lists the White and Red Papers, Wounded Knee, Vietnam, the Red Power, the American Indian Movement, civil rights and women's movements, the story of Chani Wenjack, the Jeanette Clobier-Lavelle and Yvonne Baudard cases, which sought to change the Indian Act and the loss of status by women when they married into white families, indigenous women married into white families, the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement, and the native fishing regulated police raids at Restigouche. There were many indigenous singers who, through the indifference of the media and society or the unpalatability of their messages to white ears, never were heard widely. And one such singer was artist Willie Dunn, who I just sang in the song, I Pity the Country. Dunn also was the first Indigenous filmmaker to produce a short film for the National Film Board of Canada when he made The Ballad of Crowfoot, highlighting his own original song. And there you can see some pictures of Willie. Dunn was an NDP candidate in Ottawa in 1993, perhaps indicating another difference in the Canadian experience, the trust in responsible government. Canadians, in my experience, usually believe in democracy. It may help that in our elections, there are more than two choices. And I think most of us believe if we just keep voting, the government's eventually going to get it right. Now, Willie Dunn's I Pity the Country, written in the late 1960s, manages in 3 minutes to name and call out a range of injustices that have plagued and oppressed First Nations peoples since the Europeans first arrived on these shores, many of which are now embedded in the systemic racism in our country. Dunn names the bigoted news press and that the Bill of Rights froze them. He talks of the colonial governor, pollution, depiction of stereotypes when he talks about movies, they joke me, and that line, the Hudson's Bay fleeces me. I find that especially poignant given the history of both smallpox blankets and an economic exploitation in northern communities by that company. Silly civil servants and politicians using systems like welfare and unsuitable hunting laws to exert power remind me of how long the shackles of institutional oppression have existed in this country. But at the core, in the opening and closing stanzas, Dunn ultimately pities those who oppress him. Minds which, he say, thrive on hate. And it's only by overcoming such hatred that we'll all be free.
I'm Rachel. My pronouns are she, her. I am of mixed heritage, some mystery, some not mystery. I have a bit of Jewish in there. I have a bit of Irish. There are rumors that I have Mohawk of the Wolf Clan. But again, there's lots of mystery to my bloodline. However, I was raised in small town Ontario in a white home as a white person in middle class. So that's kind of where I situate myself because that's where I was raised and what I knew. And it has been a learning journey. And before I talk more, I want to talk about what we just heard. That's called the Women's Warrior Song. And it came to Elder Martina Pierre. She is from the Lil'wat Nation in Western Canada, Interior Salish. She was in a sweat lodge on a spiritual journey. And she says, I'm not sure where it came from or who taught it to me, but it came to me. So she views that as a calling. That's a calling for help. Help me. Can we come together? Can we join in the strong energy? Because she was like calling out to a higher power to help, and she goes, because sometimes we forget to call for help, and I think she's very correct in that. And so she sang it to the elder with whom she was working in the sweat lodge, and he said to her, go stand in the river and sing that, and if you sing that in the river, it will travel to people all across Turtle Island. It makes me want to cry because it's so beautiful, right? Such a beautiful image that the water carrying the song. And I think I'm partly emotional because I miss my sister Beverly today. I think she should be here speaking, and I love her. So I want us all to think of Beverly today. And she should be speaking these words and bringing knowledge to us. And I will do a sort of job of that. I think about the singing, and I kind of on a spur of moment said, singing from the Spirit, but that's exactly what all this is. That's what those women were singing. And that song in particular, the Women's Warrior Song, it is the first song I heard as I went to a powwow with the Sisters and Spirits in Six Nations. It has become somewhat of an anthem of the missing and murdered Indigenous women. But we have also heard it sung at Fairy Creek when they were trying to stop the old growth, logging, the old forests. And the youth show up, and the youth are singing this song. And because this song is flowing like a river and being spread. And I think sometimes so long Indigenous were invisible to us purposely. They were purposely invisible to us. And so we hear the songs and we go, yeah, whatever, they're pounding their drum. But it's meaningful, and it's their way that they have shared their cultures together, and it's our way of listening, right, as white people. Listening, understanding, and sometimes, dancing along. I tend not to sing it because I was told a long time ago by an elder that you have to be invited to sing. And I have been invited on occasion to sing, but it is sacred. And we as white people, and I think this is what Jamie was talking about, tend to walk in there and take over things and go, the spirituals, we can sing that. We know this is our childhood. But you know what? We are allies. We are walking with, we are not walking for. We are singing with, we are not singing for. And it doesn't matter what marginalized group, see, this comes from all my social work and singing work, but this is the core, right? We are allies, and it means we walk with and we lend power to. We don't take over, we don't do it for. So we have to be careful sometimes in what songs we sing and how we sing them. And I think the best way that we can do that is contextualize the songs and who wrote it. Why did they write it? Where does it come from? And then really understand. And then, oh boy, that spirit just comes out of you, right? And I know so many people here who have sung in protest. So you kind of know what I'm saying when I talk about how that feels, that sharing of the spirit, walking together. I can't even name the number of contexts that I've done that, but it is so powerful. And yeah, music just does that thing, right? It just does that thing. So I think as allies, our job is to ask why. Where did that come from? Is it okay if I sing that? Is it okay if I join you? To ask permission, to put ourselves as support for marginalized communities of all kinds. And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no, but that's okay, because we can also listen in spirit as well. We can listen. and let it come in our spirits and let it transform us. Instead of always knowing the answer, maybe we always ask questions and are curious. As you can see, this is very emotional for me, but I think it's okay to be emotional. Music is emotional, and so is singing, and so are hard subjects. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I just want to contextualize our final thing that we're singing together, which is We Shall Overcome. Now, again, Pete Seeger shows up, go figure. Well, you know, he's a white man. He had the power to be able to show up and have influence, right? And I always want us to remember that too. You know, I know we know the story of Charles Wendat, but there are thousands of Indigenous stories that a white person hasn't told. And maybe it's time that we pay attention to that. And again, listen to those stories in those contexts. But I love We Shall Overcome because it typifies the songs of any protest or movement. So it is a mishmash. It is a total mishmash. It started out as a different song. Probably, they trace it back to the 1700s, if you can believe that. The Prayer of the Sicilian Mariners, or O Sanctissima. So they think it's kind of a blend of those melodies that have traveled through the land. And as it's gone, people have rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. And I think that is so beautiful because it lands at us today. So, I have to say, Reverend Dr. Charles Tindley was one of the first to do some reworking of the language of the song. And then we have Atron Twig and Kenneth Morris in 1945 did some jiggling with some gospel. But, you know, don't you just love it? It all comes to a black woman striker who was involved in a labor strike down in South Carolina. So they were striking for 30 cents more, right, with American tobacco, Lucille Simmons. And she started singing this song. And at the time it was I'll overcome, or I will overcome. And she just set a fire by changing it to we will overcome. And then sort of changing and jigging the lyrics so that it was, it would suit whatever context when they were marching and wanting more pay. And so she took it to the Highlands Folk School and taught it to Zilphia Horton. I wonder if it's any relation to our dear Beverly. I would not be surprised. And she taught it to Pete Seeger, who ended up playing it in front of Dr. Martin Luther King on September 2nd, 1957. So We Shall Overcome has had quite a journey. And it's been influenced by many people. So I thought it was an appropriate ending today because it's one of our most beloved and it's one of the most famous protest songs in terms of the 60s and 70s in North America. But it actually has gone worldwide and people sing it all over the world. And I think that's pretty powerful. So I think we should join those voices today. So that's a little context for our final hymn. And thank you for letting me speak. Oh, I guess we're all going to rise and sing now. Yeah.
We shall overcome.
beloveds, lifted in spirit, nourished in community, alive in the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Remember that you are charged to dedicate your lives to the building of beloved community, setting hearts and minds to the work before us, empowered to speak truth to power, to love abundantly and even recklessly, and build community together. Go in peace, beloveds, singing the song of justice. We extinguish our chalice, but not the fire in our hearts.